Hey everyone, you are watching the Indian Dev. I am Ayush and I'm back again with another exciting ReactJS project. As you guys can see in this particular video, we will be developing this amazing expense tracker, or we can say the expense manager using ReactJS. And like as you can see that the UI is pretty much clean, and you can see that we can see the balance of like the expense manager. We can see the expenses, we can see the income, and we can see all the transactions that has been done with this application, and we can also search from this transaction list. And like before jumping onto the actual video or actual development, what I just wanted to make sure is that if you guys are new to my channel, then please make sure to subscribe to the Indian Dev. And if you guys are on Instagram and using that on the daily basis, you guys can follow me over there, where I'm constantly sharing the tech related content, or we can say the development content on Instagram. So yes, now we can see the functionality of this expense tracker. So here you can see that this is the title of the application. Here we are showing the balance, and if I just click on this add button, that is representing the add transaction. So by clicking on that, we are having another option to enter the expenses. So if I can add like maybe 2000 in food, from here I can select that whether it is a expense or whether it is a income. So like I would mark that as expense, and I can add the transaction, and you will see that the expense amount has been increased. The balance will decrease because our income was 10,000, and we already have like expenses of 5,000 as travel. Now if I can add this 2,000 as the expense, it should be 7,000, and the balance should be 3,000. So let's see, like if I click on a transaction, what happens. So I just clicked on add transaction, and you can see that expenses has been increased, the balance is reduced, and the transaction list, you can see the food with 2000 amount is like added to the transaction. Here I can search for food, like in case we are having a lot of transactions that we will be definitely having if we are like saving our data for a month or for a year. And again, like this is the very basic application. We can always like customize our application in terms of filtration of the transactions. We can add the categories in the expenses, like if it is for food, it is for travel, it is for household, whatever the stuff that we just wanted to add. But that is like the next level in the expense tracker. And like in this particular video, we will be like achieving this using the style components, and for managing the states we will simply use the React hooks. Maybe later on we can like convert this expense tracker as a fully functional expense app using Redux. So yes, that we can see in the future videos, but as of now we can like develop this amazing application. So let's start. Like for starting, what I've done is, if you can see on my screen, I just ran this command npx create react app, and the name of my application react expense tracker. So what it has done is, it has just created a sample structure, or we can say the base structure for our project, and it has also installed the packages, like the basic packages that has been required for the basic React application. So it's done, it's saying happy hacking. And after like creating this React expense tracker, what I've done is, I just simply opened up this particular application or folder in the VS Code, the code editor. And like you can see here that this is the base structure of that project that we just created from the npx create react app command. And here is the basic structure. And in this project, what I've done is, simply in the as mentioned in the package.json, I just ran this command npm start, and it has started our application on my local server. So here you can see that it is running on my local server. Now to work with, what I just need to have in my project is npm I will be installing the style components. So style components is again a very good library to style your React components. Like we will not be like choosing the simple css, we will be working with the style components. And if you are confused about style components, you can simply go on my channel and you can have a look on the style components. And it is pretty easy and pretty similar to css, but it says like it is having its own benefits. I have developed like all the applications using style components, so yes, you can like look for that. It is highly in demand. And like also you can check out some other react.js basic projects from my channel. Now like until then it's installing, what I can do is let it install. What I can do is, I can simply remove the unwanted code as of now. Like we will not be doing any kind of testing. I can remove this as well. And if I can go to the source structure in the index.js file, I don't need this kind of analytics or the extra library, and I can simply remove the css files as we will not be using, and I can also remove this logo. as we will not be using the simple CSS. So if I just can go to the app file, and from here as well I can remove this, and instead of all that like React logo, what I can do is I can simply write my name just to check if like our application is working or not. So if I can refresh this, so yes, here you can see that Indian dev is available here. Now our like directory structure, if we can see, okay, this I can remove the test one. Okay, so here you can see we are having the index.js file and app.js file. Index.js is simply binding our application to the HTML document, and in the app.js file we will be doing our actual development. And if we can simply go to package.json, no, the style components is being installed, so once it's done we can use them. But before that, like what we can do is we can just analyze the application, the already created application, as like how we're gonna develop this. So if you can look at this UI, then you will definitely see that we can break this UI into like some parts. Like this is maybe the header part, or simply the heading for our application, and then we can split up, like this is the overview component, we can say this is the overview component, and this is the transactions component. So we can like divide our application in like these two major components, and inside this overview component you can see that this add transaction component is there and some overview details is here. So we can simply break it down. So we will start once the style components is installed. So let's wait for that. I'll meet you once it's installed. So now it's done, the style components has been installed. You can see that in the package.json file itself. Now I can close this terminal and I can simply jump onto the like app.js file where we are going to like code our application. So for that, what I can do is I can simply import the styled from the styled components, and like another thing is, like whenever you are stuck in this application, or if you just wanted to take the reference of my code that I'll be creating in this video, then what you can do is you can simply go to this URL, that is the GitHub repository for React expense tracker, that you can also find in the description box. And from here as well you can find all the related links. You can find the demo link, you can simply go to the source, you can like find out all the designing or styling part, like as what I'll be like doing in this video. So you can like watch that particular thing from this like repository itself. So yes, like it will be beneficial for you. Now what I've done is I just imported the style components. I can create a container for our application. For that I'll be writing style, and that will be a div. So I'll be creating a div. Instead of this particular div, I can simply write it as container. And if I can refresh this, okay, so it requires to restart the server. That I can simply do. I can simply go here because it will take a lot of time in compiling, so npm start will be easier to me. Okay, so the server is again now like inside the container. I can provide some of the properties, like I'll need this like heading and these all in the row manner. So what I'll do is I can simply define the display flex, and the flex direction I can define as column. So this way what I can expect is, like if I can have the header here, header that will represent maybe the expense tracker, so let's see. Okay, so I just need to create the header component as well. Const header equals to style dot span, maybe because I just wanted to write the text here. And for that header part I can define the color. So for color I can choose black. Okay, black, and like some sort of styling. Font size I can provide, font size maybe 25 pixels, and font weight we can provide as bold. Now here you can see, one more thing we can do is I just wanted to develop this application using the Montserrat font. For that I can simply go to Montserrat font in the browser, and I can find the Google fonts link that I can simply inject in my HTML. So like you can always, like if I just wanted to copy this regular font, I can simply select this style and you will get the link, and you can simply import this particular link to your index.html file so that like you can use this particular font. So I'll be simply going to my index.html file and I'll be pasting the link here. And if I just wanted to provide the font family to the whole application, I can simply write font family as Montserrat in here. So now you can see that the font is reflecting. And now one thing that we can definitely do is, this is flex column, display flex, and the flex direction is column. I can simply provide the align items just to align the items in the center, and the item is in center. Now we can provide some sort of maybe margin from top can be 30 pixels, and it's again from the horizontal I don't see 0, and for the bottom it can be 10 pixel. Now I can remove this, the Indian tab tag, and we are having the expense tracker heading here. Now what I can do is I can simply maybe provide some sort of directory structure here. I'll be creating the home component. For that I can create modules. Inside the modules I'll be having the home module, and inside the home module I'll create a new file that is index.js, and this index.js will represent the home, we can say the home module. And I can simply write the const and simply the part for the home component, and I can export it, export default home component. And from here what I can do is I can simply maybe this time return a div that is saying it as home component, and I can import it here. But before that I just wanted to write home component, now it's fine, and I can simply import this from import home component from module/home, and I don't need to write this index.js file, because whenever we are writing this path module/home, so inside this directory it will search for the index.js file, and if that's available it will opt it by default. So home component is here. Now I think we are done with this part, with the header part. Now what all the things we will be doing inside this home component, and this will be the main component for our application as of now, because here we will be managing the states that can be useful to store the transactions, to manage the balance of our application. So style I have import add, and I will simply create a container again here inside this. Container is basically the approach to contain a lot of things here. So here what I'll be doing is I'll be having exactly two components. If I can see in this component, the overview component and the transactions component. So for that, if I can create here inside this home new file as overview component.js, and it will be the similar to the home component, just the name will be different. I can write here as overview component, and if I can simply import it here, overview component is here. Now I just need to import this, import overview component from this overview component. And again I can do one thing, I can simply create the transaction component in a similar way, transaction component, and I can create new file for that as well, transaction component.js. and inside it as well I'll be writing the same code, just the name will be different. And the transition component, I'll be writing the transition component. And now you can see that we are having the home component and the overview component. Now I can minimize these files, because inside the index.js file we can have this transaction component as well. Now you can have a look. So we have divided the components. Now we just need to work on the separate components. So I'll be going to the overview component for the first part, and inside this, as we again need the things in the columns, because rows, because this is one row and this is another row. So for that, this seems to be fine, the flex direction and all. One thing I can do is I can remove this margin as of now. Margin, we can take margin maybe 10 pixels, and inside this what I'll be doing is I'll be simply writing that structure that will be showing the balance and some other stuff. So for this part I can create a box, or we can say the container. I'll be calling it as balance box equals to styled dot div. It will be div 2 backticks, and inside these 2 backticks I can keep it as display flex, but the flex direction should be row, because we need these in the columns. And as you can see, the property can be justify content as space between, because you can see that these are separated by the space in between them. And inside this balance box, if I can remove this, I can simply write balance box, and inside these balance box what I can have is I will be simply having the balance. Maybe if we can start with a hard-coded value, maybe 10,000. So balance is 10,000, and for the add transaction button, what I can have is I can simply write it as add transaction, and it will be a button. So for this add transaction, what I can have is as it is a button, firstly I'll be writing the background. Background can be black again, and the color should be white, and just I'll be writing it here, add transactions, and the text should be add. So here you can see that add is available here. Now we can provide some more styling to this part. If I can provide the padding can be 5 pixels from the top and bottom, and 10 pixels from in the horizontal direction. And inside the balance box, I just need to write as align items center, so that it can be centered in the vertical space as well. We can provide the border radius as 4 pixels. The border radius is 4 pixels available here. I can provide the property as cursor pointer, because we need a pointer over this. So here you can see that the cursor pointer is available here. Now for the font weight can be bold, and the font size should be 15 pixels. Now you can see that this is pretty much good here. And inside the balance box as well, what I can do is I can simply provide the font size as 18 pixels, and the balance is looking good. We can provide some more properties, the font weight as 100, and width is 100% as well, and it is wrapped under this container. So we need to provide the width as 100% here as well. Okay, so this is it. And inside this, here you can see that if I just simply talk about the balance part, that is done. Now what we can do is we can work on this add button, and for this we will be having like some sort of state if the add transaction is visible here or not. So for that I'll be creating the state here, maybe is add transactions visible, and here I'll be writing toggle add transactions. So it will be used just to manage if that add transaction option is like visible or not. So for that what we can do is, and one customization I can do here is like what to show on the button. So if is add transaction is visible, then I'll show the cancel option, else I'll be showing the add option on the button. So by default it should be the add option. Once it's clicked and that modal is open, then only we will be showing the cancel, like here you can see. So like this is for the add transaction button itself. Now what I can do is, if I can create a view for the transaction. For that I can write const add transaction view, and that will be again a functional component in which we will be having all the stuff, and I can simply import it here, and that will be the conditional rendering. So if it is available here, then only I'll be showing this particular transaction component, that is the transaction view. And now I can simply go to this particular transaction view, and here I can like design that particular part, that is this thing, this whole box which is having like all the stuff available here. For that like I will be again creating the container, maybe we can call it as a transaction container, and like inside this transaction container we can like define its properties. So I've just created this, it will be of type div, and I can remove these properties, and inside this we can have all the stuff, like we can provide the display flex, and the flex direction will be column, because we need to show all the stuff in the row. And we can provide some sort of the border, and border can be 1 pixel, solid in behavior, and the color code we can have the simple, like I can copy it from somewhere, like you can keep the color code separate. As of now what I'll be doing is I'll simply initiate it with true, and so that we can have the visuals over this add transaction. And as of now in this add transaction we don't have anything. I'll start it with the input tag. So here you can see the input tag is available here. Similarly, like I can provide a placeholder for this particular input tag, that is amount. Similarly I can add another input for maybe description of this transaction. So here you can see that the description is available here. I can define one property as gap, so that the gap between all the components should be fixed. Now here you can see that the gap is available here. One thing I can do is I can provide the padding to this component which is having these two inputs. For adding the padding, now you can see this like outlined, or you can say the bordered box, and yes, I will be definitely providing some sort of margin as well, so that you can visualize like what's happening here. And to style the input tags inside this, I can write and input, as we are having the inputs inside this container. So I am just like not defining another like style component. I am simply providing the styles from the child tag behavior, and in this what I'll be doing is I'll simply provide some sort of like I have done the outlining none, I have provided the border, I have provided some sort of padding here, so that you can analyze the behavior of this. And now the next thing is like we need to create some like radio buttons. because we need to manage like whether this transaction is expense or the income. So for that, like what I can do is I can simply have the radio container or maybe radio box. Inside this radio box we will be like defining our radio buttons, so I can simply have a as constant radio box, and that is a div. So like in terms of providing the properties, so in the radio box these are in the columns, so I'll be going with display flex and the flex direction row, so I can provide some sort of properties here. And inside this radio button, what we can have is we can have simply have the inputs, like inputs, and in the inputs we can define the type as radio, yes, so that it can be like visible as radio button. And for that, like we can provide some sort of properties, like I will be providing the ID as expense, its name can be the type of transaction, so I'll be providing the type, and its value, like for the first value, first radio button, the value will be expense. So similarly, like I can create for like the income as well, but before that I can provide some sort of label over that, and this label is for HTML, for this is for the expense, yeah, so expense is here. Now I can simply copy this and I can simply like replace all the stuff with income, so its ID is income, HTML for income, and I can write here as income, and simply I'll replace this with income. Now you can see that this is expense and this is income, so the radio button is ready. But what we can do is inside this radio button we can again provide some sort of margin, so that there is a difference between expense and the radio button. And like now one more thing we can do is just to manage the state of these all the stuff here, like we can again define the states. But before that, one more thing we can do is we can simply create, or we can simply use this button, that is add transaction, and this add transaction. Inside this I'll be writing as add transaction. So yes, here you can see that add transaction is available here. I can simply do one thing, I will be writing it as div and align items as text align maybe. Text align to center. Okay, so the text is aligned to the center. Now what we can do is like in the add transaction option, I think that we are done with this view. The one thing that we can see that the width is not 100% to all the stuff. So for that, what I can do is I can simply go over this, this is the home container, and inside this what we can do is we can simply provide some sort of width. So I'll be going with the 360 pixel because that will be good enough at the browsers, or we can say the mobile browsers itself, and like everything is looks good. We can now go to the overview component, and inside the overview component if we can have the width is 100%, that is totally fine. And now the thing is the balance box is pretty much in the 100%, and if I can go to the add transaction view, the add transaction container, here I just need to provide the width as 100%. Okay, so the width is 100%. Now you can see that the UI looks good, and everything is fine here in the overview component. Like the amount is here, description is here, and everything is here. Now what we can do is we can come up with the transaction component, or what we can do is we can work with this cancel or add button. So this button is available here. Is that transaction available or not? So as you all know, by clicking on this, like if I can set it to false. So by clicking on this add button, we need to toggle this. So I'll be writing as on click on this particular button, and inside this on click, what I'll be doing is I'll be just toggling this particular function, and that will be dependent on the previous value of is add transaction visible. So if it is visible, like if it is false, it will be set it as true, but if it is true, then it will be set it as false. So we can check this variable. Like I refresh the application, if I click on add, then you will see that our add transaction view is visible, and if I can click on cancel, it will be toggled. So yes, like we have achieved this particular conditional rendering using the states. Now what we can do is this add transaction view, in that transaction container I can write maybe this add transaction container, I can write some sort of margin that should be 20 pixel at least. Yeah, now it's fine, the 20 pixel, and now we can work with the state management of this particular component. So for this, like as you can see, we need 3 states: amount, description, and the type of the payload, or we can say the transaction. So for that, what I've done is I have simply created 2 states. One is for amount, one is for descriptions, that is created using the React hooks. Now what I can do is I can simply again create another one for this type. So for that I can have type and the method as set type, and I can initialize it with expense. I just wanted to make sure that expense is pre-selected, so I just make this like this, and for the ready button we have the property as checked, and inside this checked property what I can do is I can simply compare the value of this type. If equals to income, then only it should be checked, and similarly I can do this for the expense as well. Now you can see, if I can refresh this application, then the expense is selected by default, and one thing the radio button is done. Now we can connect our amount and description with these as well. So for that I'll be writing as value equals to amount, that is the state, and on change behavior of this particular input tag, what I'll be doing is I'll be simply receiving the event, and I'll update, or we can set the amount of this particular state with event.target.value. This way I'll be receiving the value from this particular input, and I'll be setting up that input into the state. Similarly I can do the same stuff with the description. For description, the value is description, and I just need to use this method set description. And if we can simply go to the inspect option, and if we can check for the React developer tools. So if you guys haven't installed this React developer tool, you can simply go to the browser and search for React dev tools for Chrome, and you will definitely find it. With this we can see the state. So as of now the state is the amount is undefined, the description is undefined, if you can see now, and the type is expense. So if I can click on income, so as of now it is not clickable, but we can check for the amount. Yeah, it's being updated, and the description as well. Yeah, so it's working fine. We need to work on the radio button updates. So for the radio button updates we are having the method again, we can say the on change method. So once the radio button is on changed or clicked, we will get a callback on this method and we will be receiving the event. And for this, like, we will be using this method set type that will be updating the type of this particular thing. And I can write event.target.value. Okay, so it should be here. Now it's fine. Simply I can use this here as well, so that if you can see, we can toggle this particular state as well. And now the thing is, whenever I click on this and add transaction, so I should be able to add this transaction, add transaction method. So maybe I can create a method for that, or we can say the arrow functions. This is here, and inside this what I'll be doing is I'll be creating a payload just to save, or as of now we can console that here, the amount, the description, and the type of the application. And this add transaction we will be calling from this button, like once it's clicked on click. Add transaction is here. Now the thing is, like, this add transaction will be consoling all the information. Now what I want is, like, if I click on this add transaction button, then this modal should be like closed, but for that we need to pass the state from here, like this method toggle transaction. So I'll be passing this information to this toggle transaction, and once I click on this, I'll be toggling that transaction that I'll be receiving from the props. So now you can see in the add transaction method what we will be doing. We will be passing the information to the parent component or wherever we just wanted to save the information, and we will be closing this like view itself. So if I can reset this, now you can check if we have clicked on like add button, I can define the amount, I can define the description, and once I click on add transaction, it should console the data, and it should be able to close this view as well. Now if I'm clicking on add transaction, so you can see the view is like hidden because of this toggle functionality, and all the data for the transaction is available inside this console log. Now we are good with the state management for this function as well. Now we can simply work on like managing the transaction that I suppose that we need to keep inside this home component. Like I'll be having the states for all the stuff here, like one thing is for maybe transactions, so I just need to import this as well. Import use state from React. Now it's fine. Like I have initiated the transaction with an empty array, so initially it will be empty, and after that the transactions, I can pass this transaction to transactions component, and for adding the transaction, what I can do is I can simply define a method here, const add transaction, and inside this add transaction I'll be receiving the payload, or we can say the structure of the transaction. And what I'll be doing is I'll be simply updating the existing transactions. So for that I can have the existing transactions in the transaction array, with the spread operator, so that we are not working with this transactions. And what I can do is I can simply push the new payload in the transactions array, and once it's pushed, what I can do is I can simply update the transactions with the new transaction array. And so now we are having this add transaction method. I can simply pass this add transaction method to our overview component, because we are adding the transaction from this component itself. So we have received it from the props, and I can simply pass this in the, maybe I can write it as props.addTransaction, and once it's done you can see that like a transaction is here, so I can utilize this inside this addTransaction. And what I just need to do is I just need to write it as props.addTransaction, and inside this addTransaction I just need to pass the payload. So what I'll be doing is I'll be simply passing the amount and the description, and I'll make sure that I'm having the amount as number so that we can like do the calculations. And for description DASC is fine. And one more thing I can do is I can define the ID for this, and for like having the unique ID, as of now what I can do is I can simply use the timestamp for the current time so that I can receive from date.now. And one more modification that I can do is I can provide the type of this amount input text as number. Now let's see. Okay, so it is showing some error in the index, and it is saying okay, so here I just need to write it as push. Now it should be fine. So what we have achieved till now is let's see if it is working or not. I can go to the React Dev Tools, and inside the Dev Tools if I can click on the home component, then you will see a state that is for the transaction that is like currently empty array. Now if I can write the amount, now you can see I cannot enter any of the string here because this is for type number. And if I can write, maybe consider 50,000 as the salary, and it's a part of income, so I can add it as a transaction. Once I have clicked on add button and in the transaction button, then the payload is like navigated to this home component. Like as you can see in the overview component, if I just click on add transaction, then it will pass the information to the add transaction method that is available in the home, and that is adding the transaction to the transaction array. And here we can see that in the transaction array we are having the information about that part, and like as of now it is hard coded. If I can add another transaction as maybe 10,000 as household as the expense, then you will see the state is updated with another kind of transaction that is for an expense. So we are good with the state management. Now what we can do is we just need to work on the transaction component, but before that what we can do is, or what we can have is like this, like if I can cancel this, like this particular overview for like for the expense and the income part. So for that what we can do is inside the overview component, like just below this add transaction view, what I can create is I can simply create expense container that will be showing the information about the expense and the income. And for that I can simply create some sort of styling here that is for expense container, that you can see that is simple like flex row, because you can see that we need them as column. And these are the simple like properties. And inside this what I can create is I can create two boxes, one for expense and one for income. Maybe I can write it as expense box, and inside this expense box if you can see that we can simply write like if I can write here as this is for expense, and inside this expense I can create a span tag, and inside this span I can provide the expense. And similarly what I can do is I can simply create it as for income, and for income I can maybe write it as $5,000, and I just need to provide the styling to this expense. So for that I will again create a style component, and that is for expense box. So I can replace this like this, and inside the expense box we are having the data as rows, so I'll be using the flex direction as column, and I can remove this as of now. And I can provide some like more properties like the border radius, the border, and some sort of padding. Then you can see the result is here. And like I can fix the width of this as well, so that like we are having the equal sized boxes. And the font size is fine here, like for the expense. And if I just wanted to like design this span, so what I can do is I can simply use this approach, like I am designing this span. And inside this span, like what I can do is I can simply provide the font weight and the font size, so that it is pretty much clear here. And one thing I can do is, just to provide the color, what I can do is I can simply provide some sort of properties in the expense, like if it is income or not. For that, I like in the income box I'll be writing it as true, and for this I'll be writing it as false, so that we can define the colors depending on the dynamic properties. So if I can go to the expense box, so here you can see that inside the expense box I'll be writing the color of this font for the span, and I can make it dynamic using the dollar. And I will be simply writing dot, like if props is available, so if props dot is income, if it is an income I'll be using the green color, and if it's not the income I'll be using the red color for the expenses. So now here you can see that the expense and the income are like in the correct color code. Now we are done with the overview transaction, or we can say the overview component. Now we need to work on the transaction component. For that I just need to go inside this transaction component, and inside transaction component, as you can see, we are having a search box and the transaction cell, we can say. So for that, like I will be like writing it as transaction, and here what we can do is inside the transaction we are having a input box, input, and this input will, I can define the placeholder for this. Placeholder can be the search. Now here we can see that the margin, I just need to remove this margin as of now, so that we are having the data here. And inside the container, what I can do is I can provide some sort of properties, like how we need the data. So the display flex is here, the flex direction column is here. I can provide some sort of padding and the font size to this. Font family is already defined at the top, so we need not to worry about that. And one thing we can do is we can define the font weight as bold. Yeah, the font weight is bold. And now the thing is, like if we can compare, the transaction should be here. And for the input, we can design the input as well, like how it should look. So the input is fine, the width is 100%. Now I just need to make sure, yes, the transactions width is fine. If I can simply go to the transaction component, and in the container part I just need to provide the width, that is fine. Now I just need to work for the transaction cell, and that transaction cell we can say like for all the transactions that we are having in the state. So for that, what I'll be doing is I'll be checking from the props, like if we are having the props dot transactions, that we have defined here, transactions, props dot transactions is there, or we can say dot length is here. Then only we will be showing, or we can say we can iterate the transactions using the map method. Otherwise we will not be showing any data here. So, and inside this map we will be receiving the payload, or we can say the transaction object, and we will be returning the transaction cell from here. And to this transaction cell I'll be providing the payload. So here you can see that if the transaction is empty, then we need not to show the transaction cells, and if the transactions is array is having some of the payloads, then we will be like iterating over those transactions, and we will be like the spelling is wrong, transaction cell, we will be showing the transaction cell for each item like this. And for this I can like create a component that will be easier to visualize, like this transaction cell. And in this transaction cell, what I can have is I'll be returning this as maybe we can say the cell, and inside this cell we will be having one for the description and another one for the, like if I can write here as like props dot payload, as we are having the data in the payload, and the description key. And similarly I can show the amount here, and I'm marking it as dollar currency, so I'll be using the amount key here. And like I just need to define this cell here, and it will be div. So I just need to provide this properties to this cell, and for this, like what I'll be having is, like as we need to show the data in the columns, so I'll be using the display flex and the flex direction row and some like more CSS here. The display flex direction is row, some sort of padding. And just to check that, what I can have is I can have 100, we can say the petrol, and I have marked it as expense. So now here you can see that the transaction is added here, and I just need to make sure that it is fine. So I can add more properties here. Now it's fine. And just to check if it is the expense or not, so I can simply write is expense, because we need to show these color, like if it is the income or it is the expense. So I'll be writing it as is expense, and inside this is expense, what I'll be doing is I'll be checking that if the transaction type is expense or not. If the transaction type is expense, that then I'll be receiving is expense inside this cell as. So for that, what I can do is I can simply write, now if you can have a look, that I have written that border right is 4 pixels of solid, and the color is determined from this property is expense. So here you can see that the data is fine. Now one thing that we need to take care of, like it is not adopting the width 100%, so we just need to check like from where we are having this issue. So the overview content component is taking 100% width, that means the container is fine. If I can check it in the expense, or we can say inspect option, then you will see, okay, so this is having the width 100%, so this div is having width 100%. Now the transaction, the input and the div, okay, so I just need to provide width 100% to everything. I'm here in the transaction component, and the width is 100% for this container. And for the input as well, I just need to write as width 100%, that is sorted. And if I can align the item as flex start, so the transactions is here, it is adopting the width 100%, and I can define it as well width 100% for the cells, so that you can see that the cell is also like adopting the behavior for that. And one thing that is remaining, I can provide the border to other part as well. So for that I'll be writing this. Now you can have a look. Okay, now you can have a look. I just need to write it the top so that our like right border is visible as well. So now you can have a look. If I can add the transactions again, like that was for expense, and if I can add some salary as income, then you can see that the salary is also added in the transactions as the green, or we can say the income part. Now we just need to work on the balance and the expenses. For that, what I can do is I can simply go to the home component, and inside this home component I'll be creating a method as we can say the calculate balance. That will be a arrow function, and inside this calculate balance what I can have is I can define expense is equals to 0 like before the calculation, and similarly I can have the income as 0, and I'll be mapping around, or we can say the looping around the transactions. So I'll write transactions.map, and I'll be receiving the payload inside this map. And inside this map what I'll be doing is, if the payloads type is equals to expense, then I just need to write expense equals to expense plus payload dot amount. Else what I need to do is I just need to add it into the income. Like if it is a type of expense, then I'll add the amount in the expense, otherwise I'll be adding the amount to the income part. So here it is pretty much clear. Now what I can do is just to reflect this in the UI, I can have like some more states, like for expense, and the method can be the update expense, and I can initialize it with 0 because initially the expense will be 0, and similarly I can have it for the income as well. And once we have done the calculation, we can like update the expense and the incomes separately. Like update expense, I have provided the calculated expense, and that's it, like for the update balance method. Now what we can do is we can use the useEffect React hook. useEffect React hook, and this useEffect, what it will be doing is it will be just calculating the balance for us. And the dependency for this useEffect is, like I just wanted to calculate the balance whenever the transactions is like updated, so I'll mark the transactions in the dependency area of this useEffect, so that whenever I change any of the transaction, or if I can add any of the transaction, then only it should go to the calculate balance, and inside this it will be updating the expense and the income. I can pass this data to overview component because we need to show the expense and the income to in the overview component. So I can simply have the incomes as well this way. Like inside the overview component I am receiving the income and the expense in the props, so I can simply use this. I can write income here. Now you can see like it is showing as 0 because we have initialized the income and the balance, or we can say the expense as 0. And for balance as well, just to make it dynamic, what we can do is I can simply write like props dot income, like whatever is my income, I can simply subtract it with the expenses so that we can have the actual balance. Now we can go and simply add some sort of transactions. Like if I'm having salary as 50,000, I have added it as a salary and it is the income. So if I click on add transaction, it should be like reflecting in the income part and the balance as well. So here you can see guys that income is visible and that is like available in the balance, and we are having the transaction for the same. If I can add some expenses, maybe for food, maybe 500 for food, add transaction, you can see the expense is updated, balance is updated, and the transaction has been added. Food, another food item, maybe 1000. You can see the list is growing. Now like what we need to do is that, like just to make it more functional, we can like have the search functionality, so that like if there are a lot of transactions, so that we can search around the transactions in this application. So for that, like transactions, or we can just search functionality is available in the transaction component. And for that, like I can simply go to the transaction component, and whenever you need to have such kind of info, then you can simply like initiate the state like this. I just need to import use state from React. Now the thing is, I just created a state as filter transaction, so I'll be always like showing the filter transaction in the UI. So I can simply write as filter transactions, and depending on this input text, what I'll be doing is I'll be like I'll be creating another state for the search data, or we can say search text. I can provide the value here. Value is search text, and on the on change of this particular input box, what I'll be doing is I'll be simply like calling a method just to filter the data. And I'll be receiving the event. With that, I'll be updating the update search text with event.target.value. Event.target.value. It will be updating the info as well. And okay, so I just need to initiate it with the empty string. Okay, that's fine. Now what I can do is I can create a method as filter transaction, filter data. Maybe it will be an arrow function, and I can simply write down the logic of filtering the transaction. So for that, what I can do is, if like there is no search text, like the search text is empty, then I can simply update the transactions from the with the like transaction I am receiving from the props. And if we are having some data in the search transaction, or we can the search text, so I'll be again using the same approach. I'll create the constant as transaction, and I'll be like having all the transaction in this transaction array. And maybe I can initiate it with let, because I just wanted to filter. And in the transaction, I'll be writing transaction.filter, and inside this I'll be writing the filter query. And here we are having the payload to every transaction. With that payload, what I'll be writing is payload.description, maybe to lowercase, and if I just wanted to check if the payload's transactions description is including our search string or not, so I'll be writing includes. And inside this includes, what I can have is I can have search text, or we can receive the search text here, search text dot to lowercase. And yes, I'll be trimming it out so that for the space as well it should work. Okay, so this is the filter transaction, and I'll be updating this filter transaction using the data. Now if we can have a look, I have refreshed this. I'm having maybe this information, income. Okay, so it is not showing the filter transaction. Okay, so filter transaction is not coming from the props, it is coming from the. Now if I can refresh this, and we need to filter the data as I haven't called this. So whenever, like, I can again define the useEffect React hook here as well. From here I'll be filtering the data, filter data, and I'll be providing the search text here, and the dependency injection will be again this part, that is props.transactions. If the transactions are updated, then only I'll be filtering the data. And one more approach to filter data is, like, whenever some text is changing in the search input, then also I'll be filtering the data. So now let's see, it should work because we are having all of the things. The salary is defined here, so the salary is here. And if I can add more, food, for food maybe 1000, food as expense. So everything is looks perfect, the balance is correct, the expense is fine, the income is fine, the transactions are also visible in the UI. Now if we can check the search functionality on change event of this search input box, what it will be doing is it will be updating the state and it will be calling the filter data method. Inside the filter data method, we are filtering the transaction depending on the description and we are not comparing the case. So if I can write salary, then you can see that all the transaction related whatever you search, that will be available here. So this way, like, you have achieved all the functionality of this particular project. And yes, that's all about this video. So as we have developed this like expense tracker for us, now one more thing we can do is we can simply deploy our application to the GitHub pages, that is for free, so that we can have the live URL for our application that we can mention in our resume, just or we can say we can share the link to our colleagues just to showcase your work. For that, you can simply go to this repository and all the steps are visible here. You just need to add the home page in the package.json file with your username and the repository name, and you just need to add these scripts. And once you have started this script, that is npm run deploy, that will be deploying your application to GitHub pages. You just need this dependency GitHub pages, and you can also like take the reference from like my React expense tracker. And if I can go to the package.json file, you will see I have added the home page and I have installed the GitHub pages dependency, and I just ran this command npm run deploy and it has deployed my application to GitHub pages. You can get the URL as well. So I'll be leaving the URLs for all these repository and the demo in the description box itself. So yes guys, it was an amazing learning with this project, and later on in this project we will be adding the Redux part, or we can add like more customization, like we can provide the categories to each transaction, or we can set to that each expense, so that we can have the visualize or data for monthly basis or so on. So like you can do a lot of customization with this app. With that said, like if you guys learn something from this video, please make sure to hit the like button so that I can get motivated to build more projects like this. And like in the future we are coming with more React.js based projects and month stack based project, so we'll be working with full stack development. Till then, make sure to hit the like button on this video. If you guys are new to my channel, please make sure to subscribe and also connect with me on Instagram. Thank you for watching this video guys. Thank you very much.